Well, hello, and welcome back to Read Becca. I do not often read multiple entries in a series back to back, but I'm trying very hard to get better at that, and so we have several books that I read to finish out the Frieda Klein series by Nikki French. So, Nikki French is an author duo, Nikki Gerard and Sean French, who are a couple as far as I know, that have been writing crime fiction for a long time, have a lot of different individual standalones and series. I think primarily in the psychological thriller type space, and that's what this is. So Frieda Klein, as a character in the series, is following a psychotherapist who enters into kind of a relationship with the police to assist them on cases. Initially that's kind of grudging, but she very often, in every book, she goes off the rails and doesn't follow what they're telling her to do, kind of investigates on her own, rather than just purely assisting them, as is usually the case with amateur sleuth type situations in books. Frieda is a very frustrating character. She's not entirely likable, and though she is a therapist, she's not very well adjusted either. She kind of pushes people out of her life, or she cares deeply for people, and very often is the person who is supporting everyone around her. But she's a curmudgeon. She kind of wants everyone to go away and leave her alone and just be alone at her home with her cat. And she does have a very abrasive personality. So that is one of the reasons why it's kind of hard to get along with her as you read, but yet she's such a compelling character. She very often is inconsistent though, and I think that's probably one of the main things I would get across if you're diving into this series, is that the quality of the books, very inconsistent. The character, not totally consistent, but often I can see that the authors made a choice for inconsistency to favor the reader's interest and the plot more than consistency. And you can tell, because this is very voraciously readable, that they've delivered a really action-packed, really intrigue-filled story that is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. So I don't think this is inconsistent in terms of the enjoyability of the series. It's all the way through, the mysteries were great. I think over the course of this series, we've had such a fantastic range of types of cases, and specifically, I think the four books that I am going to talk about are that range of cases represented very, very well. So at the very beginning, Frieda is getting pulled into a single case, and we do tidy up that case in the first book, but we also establish and start a series-long arc. So I'm going to try to talk about each of these books that I read, the final four, without getting into spoilers for either the present case or the series-long arc. I'm going to try to be very vague and talk in broad terms as I have been. So the four that I read over the last month or so were Friday on My Mind, Dark Saturday, Sunday Silence, and The Day of the Dead. And Friday on My Mind is sort of an outlier in that it's very focused on Frieda, almost entirely, in that right at the beginning we had a murder. That murder is someone from Frieda's past, and there is a present connection, but Frieda doesn't understand it. And because of that present connection, Frieda is the main suspect for the murder. So there is this duality of Frieda both being a suspect for the murder and being suspicious to the police, but them also kind of wanting her help because she's the most likely person to know something that would be helpful about this if this present connection is in place. So it's very compelling because of that, because even Frieda doesn't know. But this was also one of those stories that had a lot of character inconsistencies, I thought. Normally, Frieda is the first person to not buy into stereotypes and the easy answers that people would jump for. She always questions things. And here, I think a lot of choices were made for a compelling story where she just accepted things that I don't think she normally would. So the character behavior was not there, but the story was great. Then we move on to Dark Saturday. Dark Saturday is completely the opposite. There's almost no personal Frieda connection to it, really. It's very, very focused on a psychiatric case. So Frieda is diving into effectively a cold case. She, over the course of the series, has become connected with some people very much higher up in rankings, in terms of power, that can pull a lot of strings and involve her in some interesting things, definitely. But so they set her on this cold case, basically. And it is the matter of a woman who has been locked up in a psychiatric ward since she was a teenager, and it's been years now. She's suspected of, or was confirmed, basically insane for having murdered her entire family. But for some reason there are questions about that. And Frieda, not with the police in this case, is looking into this and talking directly to this patient who basically has been incommunicative and not in touch with reality for multiple years. And so it's all very psychological, very much Frieda trying to break through to this person while also doing the legwork of investigating, because she just can't stop. And that seems to be kind of what they were hoping for when she was put on this. So it's a very different dynamic from the previous book, where here she doesn't know, and I felt like those character traits of her always being curious and questioning and never letting up were very prominent to the flip side of the previous book. So this was one of my favorites, I think, in the series, because it is so psychologically forward, and it was just absolutely barreling forward for me the entire way through, nonstop. So this book, or I guess at this point, it's very interesting to me that I was reading these back to back, because I never am reading things back to back, like I said up front. But this was the perfect series to be doing that, because the end of this book is the beginning of the story that dives into the next book. So we are getting now a continuous story from the last little bit of Dark Saturday all the way through Sunday Silence, and then again through the Day of the Dead. So there is a continuous story that's tying things up over the course of 3 books. So it was perfect that I happened to decide to read these all together. So I have to be sort of very vague with Sunday Silence, mainly in that we are back to some personal things, some things from earlier, prior, and very specifically, I would say, there's a lot of attacks on Frieda personally, because she has gained some prominence in this role as sort of a helper to the police. That's drawn some negative attention to her. So she's dealing with that very heavily and feeling unsafe, feeling like her family and those connected to her are very unsafe. And it's tying in a lot with ongoing cases and the larger series-long arc. So mainly we are really developing relationships here and trying to uncover some things that Frieda has been suspecting through the whole series. So this one I think was very good, but it was a middle book, and so I felt that going through this. Day of the Dead, I was not expecting. I thought it was finishing the Sunday, and then I finished that and realized, oh no, there is a whole nother book. Day of the Dead is this phenomenal wrap up to the series, but it starts so strangely in that there's no Frieda at the beginning of this, and it's also kicking off something completely new. So that feels weird, but it's the perfect hook where I was gripped from the first pages. I actually started this intending to set it aside, and I couldn't. I just kept going. I read like 30% without stopping because it was so good. We're kicking off with this new case from the eyes of a witness, where basically a car goes barreling down a hill and hits a shop front, and it turns out the driver was dead already. So what is going on there? And so we are getting the witness, we're getting the police as they're investigating this, and Frieda is nowhere. There is no Frieda in the beginning of the story. So it was like, what's going on? And we slowly develop forward in that aspect. And then we also flip to a student who is a little bit immature and can't figure out what she wants to do in terms of her studies, but she is in a psychotherapy field and is looking for a dissertation topic. And the topic of Frieda Klein comes up. And so she begins investigating Frieda Klein and looking into who she is and what her role is really with the police. And I think that's where I have to leave it without giving spoilers, but that doesn't even tell you. There is a whole big chunk of this that is Frieda. But how that all interconnects finally and reaches intersections in the storytelling is very masterfully. It's really clearly been plotted out, and it's just amazing that over the 8 books we now have a culmination that truly feels like a grand climax. And it definitely felt that way, but also is unsatisfying in giving us something that feels kind of real and believable. And it felt true to the characters involved. So this very much came together, both the book and the series, like a chess game. It really, once you have it all laid out there, you can see how we got where we did in the end. And that just is very masterful. So I think the series is one I'm super happy to have read, though it wasn't always my favorite, and Frieda was often very frustrating to be in the head of. She is such an intriguing character, consistently very, very interesting to read. So I think that's about all I have to say about this. I think I've said probably more than I needed to, but this is just such an enjoyable crime thriller series that I'm now kind of sad that it's done, but also Nikki French have a massive back catalog. So I have a lot more to get to. I think that's all for me today. Thank you so very much for watching.